Hey there everyone on YouTube, this is Geoff from Geoffmobile.com, and today I'm doing a video blog post about setting your exposure in your camera. So if you have an automatic camera such as the Canon or Sony HX7V, like this one I'm filming on, you're not going to have any ability to set the exposure manually during video. So exposure in cameras is controlled by a number of things. First of all, the ISO, or sensitivity of the sensor, adjusts how much light the sensor absorbs in a given amount of time. So on SLR camera you might have ISO 100, which is the sensor is I guess the least sensitive, but it has the best quality. As you increase the sensitivity of the sensor, it's going to increase the gain and the amount of digital noise in the picture. So once you set your ISO, then you have a bunch of things to play with. You can open the shutter for a longer time, which is called the shutter speed. And for video, usually you want to use a shutter speed that is about twice your frame rate. So if I'm shooting this at 30p, I want to set my shutter at 1/60. That produces the smoothest motion, the least amount of strobing effect. Secondly, you got to set your aperture. So aperture is how wide the lens opens, and a smaller number means a bigger opening. If you have a bigger opening, that means there's more light being let in. So typically, if you have a really sunny day, and you probably want to set your aperture at quite a big number, so that the aperture will be smaller and less light will come in. So another useful tool is this thing. This is a gray card, and this side is 18% gray. So if you point your camera at the 18% gray and then calibrate your camera to be neutral exposure, the camera will be actually accurate exposure for that light. But what if you have both a sunny sun in the scene and a cloud, or shade and sun? How do you set the exposure then? Well, the main thing I learned from my course this weekend was you have to take the exposure using the gray card in the sun and then check it in the shade and find out how many stops it is difference between those two, how much light is different between the sun and the shade. And then depending on what you have in your scene, if you've got a mostly sun or some cloud or some shadow, you'll adjust your exposure to be somewhere in the middle of that. So yesterday, actually on Sunday, we were out on the street, very sunny day, and we measured that using ISO 100 and shutter speed of 1/60, the aperture required to make a good exposure in the sun was f/22, which is the maximum aperture number of that lens. And then the shade was more like f/16 or f/14. So we actually needed to set an exposure in between those numbers. And my problem was I actually set it aperture number was a bit too small, so the scene was very much overexposed. But now I know that if you're in the sun, you need to measure the aperture as well. And then another thing is that, really important, if you're outside in the sun, if your camera doesn't have a neutral density filter, you might have some problems. So it's a good idea to get a neutral density filter if you're shooting in sunlight. So I know a lot of this stuff might not make sense, and I don't really have time to explain it all in this little blog post. But some keywords to look out for. Gray card, 18% gray, and also white on the other side for setting a color balance is very helpful. And a neutral density filter for your lens is a good idea. And make sure to set the exposure in both the sun, full sun, and full shade, and then calculate the exposure somewhere in between. And of course, learning about things like aperture, shutter speed, and ISO or gain is very important as well to control the exposure. So I hope that gives you some ideas for future research, and definitely please share with me some of your videos. I can do some sort of guest blog posts on this channel if you like, and I hope this was useful. Okay, bye, take care for now. See you later.
This is like the upbeat version of the evil castle.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.